Hi, I'm Taylor Brooks, and 6 months ago my family thought it would be hilarious to dress me up as a court jester and make me walk down the aisle carrying a "Here comes the disappointment" sign at my brother's wedding in front of 300 guests. They filmed my humiliation, posted it online, and turned my pain into their viral moment. What they didn't expect was for me to turn their joke into a lawsuit that would strip away everything they thought they owned, including the very venue where they humiliated me. Sometimes the punchline comes later than expected, and sometimes it's written in legal documents. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning. If this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. The morning mist clung to the Willamette River like a secret Portland refused to let go. I stood at my Pearl District apartment window, watching the city wake up in shades of gray and green, coffee steam fogging the glass as I held my favorite ceramic mug. The invitation sat on my kitchen counter behind me, cream-colored cardstock with elegant gold lettering that announced Marcus Brooks and Sophia Romano would be joining their lives in matrimony at the prestigious Riverstone Country Club. My name appeared nowhere on the wedding party list, though I'd helped plan half the details and fronted the deposit when their credit got mysteriously declined. That should have been my first warning. The phone buzzed against the granite countertop, Marcus's name lighting up the screen. I let it ring twice before answering, already knowing this conversation would require more caffeine than I'd prepared for. "Taylor, thank God you picked up." His voice carried that particular strain of someone trying to sound casual while managing a crisis. "We need to talk about the wedding." I settled back against the window, watching a blue heron pick its way along the riverbank below. "What's wrong now? Did the florist cancel again?" No, nothing like that. Actually, everything's perfect. Better than perfect." He paused, and I could hear Sophia's voice in the background, though I couldn't make out the words. "We just had the most amazing idea for the ceremony, something that'll make the whole thing memorable. Really special." The heron froze, one leg raised, perfectly balanced. I envied its stillness. "Marcus, just tell me what you need." "Well, you know how we've been talking about making the wedding more personal. More us." Another pause. "Sophia and I were thinking about how you've always been the funny one in the family, always making people laugh, and we thought maybe you could be part of the ceremony in a really unique way." I set my mug down carefully. Something in his tone reminded me of childhood conversations where he'd convince me to take the blame for his broken windows or missing homework. "What kind of unique way?" "It's brilliant. Actually, we want you to walk down the aisle, but instead of being a bridesmaid, you'd be our comic relief. Like really lean into your personality. Make people smile before the serious stuff starts." The heron struck, quick and decisive, emerging with a silver fish writhing in its beak. "Comic relief." "Exactly. We're thinking maybe a fun costume, something that plays up your quirky side, and you could carry a sign or something witty. The photographer would love it. And think about how it'll look in the video. You'd be the opening act for our love story." I pressed my forehead against the cool glass. Through the reflection I could see the invitation behind me, that elegant script that had somehow forgotten to include my actual role in this production. "Marcus, what exactly are you asking me to wear?" "Well, Sophia found this amazing court jester outfit online. It's actually really well made, not cheap or anything. Royal blue and gold, totally classy. And for the sign we were thinking something self-deprecating but fun. Like 'Here comes the family disappointment,' or 'Still single and still trying.'" The words hit like ice water. I turned away from the window, focusing on the clean lines of my apartment, the carefully curated space I'd built for myself after years of feeling scattered and undefined in family spaces. "You want me to dress as a jester and announce my failures to 300 people?" "Taylor, come on, don't be dramatic. It's not about failures. It's about being memorable, being part of something bigger. How many people get to say they were the comic highlight of a wedding? This could be your moment to shine. My moment to shine as a joke. Your moment to shine as yourself. Look, we both know you're not the wedding dress type. You're not going to stand up there in pink satin looking uncomfortable. This way you get to be authentic, be the Taylor we all know and love." I walked to the kitchen counter and picked up the invitation, running my thumb over the raised lettering. "Marcus Brooks, oldest child, successful real estate developer, golden boy who'd never met a spotlight he couldn't commandeer. Sophia Romano, social media influencer with 100,000 followers who documented every artfully arranged moment of her life. And me, Taylor Brooks, graphic designer, apartment dweller, the family member they apparently thought was best suited for professional humiliation. What does Mom think about this idea? She loves it. She said it's perfect for you actually. Said you've always marched to your own drummer anyway, so why not make it official? Dad thinks it'll be hilarious. He's already telling his golf buddies about it. Of course he was. Richard Brooks, who'd spent my entire childhood introducing me as his spirited daughter, while Marcus was simply my son, the achiever. I could picture him now holding court at the 19th hole, describing how his quirky youngest was going to entertain the wedding guests with her charming self-deprecation. And Logan? What does he think? Logan thinks it's genius. He said you'd be crazy not to do it. Think about it, Taylor. When's the last time you were the center of attention at a family event? This is your chance. The center of attention, as the family punchline. I set the invitation down and walked to my bedroom, where my laptop sat open on the desk, a half-finished design project glowing on the screen. Clean typography, balanced composition, every element serving a purpose. Nothing random, nothing thrown in for laughs. Marcus, I need to think about this. What's to think about? It's 3 minutes of walking, maybe 4 if you really milk the entrance. Then you sit down and enjoy the party like everyone else. Plus, think about how great this'll look on social media. Sophia's already planning the hashtags. She's planning hashtags about me dressing as a jester. She's planning hashtags about our unconventional, memorable wedding. Come on, Taylor. You've always said you wanted to feel more included in family stuff. This is inclusion. I stared at my reflection in the black laptop screen. 28 years old, 5'6", brown hair that never quite cooperated with Portland's humidity, wearing the kind of simple clothes that photograph well but never draw attention. When had I become the person they thought would be grateful for the chance to be laughed at? I'll call you back, I said. Taylor, wait, the costume place needs to know by tomorrow if we're renting it, and Sophia wants to coordinate the color scheme with your outfit, so we really need an answer soon. I said I'll call you back. I hung up before he could protest further and set the phone face down on my desk. The apartment felt suddenly too quiet, the kind of silence that amplifies the sound of your own breathing until you're hyper-aware of being alone. I'd moved to this space 2 years ago after saving enough from freelance projects to afford the deposit and first month's rent. It was the first place that had ever felt entirely mine, decorated with furniture I'd chosen, art I'd collected, books I'd actually read. The invitation caught the afternoon light from my living room window, that elegant gold script seeming to mock me with its formal beauty. I picked it up again and read the details I'd memorized weeks ago. Riverstone Country Club. Reception immediately following. Cocktail attire suggested. No mention of costume requirements or comedic interludes. My phone buzzed with a text from Sophia. Taylor, Marcus told me about our conversation. I'm so excited. I found the perfect jester outfit and it's going to be amazing. Can we FaceTime tonight to go over the details? I want to make sure everything is absolutely perfect for our special day. 3 heart emojis and a wedding ring emoji followed the message. I set the phone aside without responding and made myself another cup of coffee. This time adding extra cream, because the afternoon suddenly felt like it needed softening. The thing about being the funny one in the family is that it starts so innocent. You make a joke at dinner, everyone laughs, and suddenly you're the entertainment. You wear a silly hat to a birthday party and it becomes your signature. You trip over your own feet once, and it becomes your defining characteristic. Before you know it, you're not a person with a sense of humor. You're the family comedian, expected to perform on demand and grateful for any attention, even if it comes at your own expense. I walked back to the window and watched the river flow past, carrying leaves and debris toward the Willamette's eventual meeting with the Columbia. The heron was gone, probably digesting its catch, somewhere more private than this glass-walled tower where everything felt exposed. My laptop chimed with an email notification. The subject line read, Brooks' wedding, final details, and the sender was my mother, Vanessa Brooks. I opened it reluctantly. Taylor, sweetheart. Marcus filled me in on the wonderful plan for the ceremony. I think it's absolutely perfect for you. You've always been our little performer, and this is such a creative way to be part of Marcus and Sophia's special day. I already told the ladies at book club about it, and they think it's so clever. Mrs. Henderson said she wishes her daughter had such a good sense of humor about herself. The outfit should arrive by Thursday, and I'll bring it by your apartment Friday for a fitting. Can't wait to see you shine. Love, Mom. I read it twice, looking for any sign that she understood what they were asking me to do. The phrase good sense of humor about herself stuck like a splinter. When had self-awareness become indistinguishable from self-deprecation? When had being able to laugh at yourself become more important than being taken seriously? The coffee had gone cold while I stood there, but I drank it anyway, the bitterness matching my mood. Outside, Portland continued its late afternoon routine, commuters heading home across the river, tourists wandering the waterfront with cameras and guidebooks, normal people living normal lives, probably not being asked to humiliate themselves for someone else's entertainment. I opened my laptop and stared at the design project on my screen. It was a logo for a local nonprofit, clean lines forming a tree that also suggested hands reaching upward. The client had specifically requested something dignified but approachable, professional but warm. No comic elements, no attention-grabbing gimmicks, just solid design that communicated purpose and reliability. This was what I was good at. This was who I was when I wasn't being the family's comic relief. I created things that mattered, that helped organizations communicate their missions, that connected people with causes they cared about. I'd built a reputation in Portland's design community for work that was thoughtful and effective. My clients trusted me to represent them well, but my family saw me as someone who should be grateful for the chance to dress as a jester. I picked up my phone and scrolled through my contacts until I found Rachel Thompson's number. Rachel and I had met in college, survived the post-graduation scramble together, and maintained the kind of friendship that could weather honest conversations. If anyone would tell me the truth about this situation, it would be her. Taylor, how's the wedding planning going? Are you ready to watch Marcus become even more insufferable as a married man? Despite everything, I smiled. Rachel had met my family exactly once, at my college graduation, and had somehow intuited the entire dynamic within 30 minutes. Actually, that's what I'm calling about. They want me to be in the wedding, but not as a bridesmaid. Oh no, what kind of ridiculous scheme have they cooked up now? I told her about the jester costume, the sign, the plan to make me the opening act for Marcus and Sophia's love story. Rachel listened without interrupting, which I appreciated, because it meant she was taking this seriously. Taylor, she said when I finished, please tell me you said no. I told them I'd think about it. What's to think of? They want you to humiliate yourself in front of 300 people, so they can have a viral wedding moment. This isn't inclusion, it's exploitation. But what if they're right? What if this is just who I am, and I'm being too sensitive about it? Who you are is a talented designer who runs her own business and has created a life she loves. Who you are is someone who deserves to be respected, not treated like a circus act. Taylor, listen to me. If any of my other friends told me their family was asking them to do this, what would you tell me to tell them? I sank into my desk chair, the weight of the question settling over me. I'd tell you to tell them to run. Exactly. So why is it different when it's you? Because they're my family. Because maybe this is my chance to finally be part of something instead of always watching from the sidelines. You're not watching from the sidelines. You're living your own life. There's a difference between being included and being used for entertainment. I stared out at the river again, watching the light change. As evening approached, a few joggers were making their way along the waterfront path, earbuds in, focused on their own journeys. What if I say no and they cut me out completely? Then you'll know exactly where you stand with them, won't you? Taylor, people who love you don't ask you to humiliate yourself for their amusement. People who love you don't threaten to cut you out if you won't be their performing monkey. The words hit harder than I expected, partly because they rang true and partly because I wasn't sure I was ready to face what that truth meant about my family. I'd spent 28 years making excuses for their treatment, telling myself that their love just looked different from other people's love, that being the family comedian was better than being the family disappointment. I should go, I said. I need to think about this. Taylor, whatever you decide, Make sure you're deciding for the right reasons. Don't say yes because you're afraid of being left out. You're already being left out, just in a way that makes them feel better about themselves. After we hung up, I sat in the growing darkness of my apartment, not bothering to turn on the lights. The city sparkled below, thousands of people in their own spaces, dealing with their own problems. Somewhere out there, Marcus and Sophia were probably planning seating charts and discussing last-minute details. Somewhere else, my parents were telling their friends about their clever daughter who was going to entertain the wedding guests. And here I was, trying to figure out when I'd become someone who had to choose between dignity and family acceptance. My phone buzzed again. This time it was Logan, my younger brother, the one who supposedly thought this whole thing was genius. Hey, heard about the jester thing? Pretty funny, right? Sophia's been texting me pictures of different costumes all afternoon. I answered without really thinking about it. Logan, do you actually think this is a good idea? I mean, yeah, it's perfect for you. You've always been the weird one anyway, so why not lean into it? Plus, it's just Marcus's wedding. It's not like it's a real job or anything serious. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. Just Marcus's wedding, not like it's serious. I felt something shift inside me, a kind of clarity that comes when someone accidentally tells you exactly what they think of you. Logan, what if someone asked you to dress up as a clown and carry a sign about your failures at your next work presentation? That's different. That's work. This is just family stuff. Just family stuff. Yeah, fun family stuff. Not serious like career things or whatever. Come on, Taylor. You're not exactly climbing the corporate ladder anyway. This is probably the most attention you'll get all year. I hung up on him too. The apartment had grown completely dark while I sat there, the city lights providing the only illumination. I got up and turned on a single lamp, the warm light creating a small circle of comfort in the larger darkness. Then I walked to my kitchen and made myself dinner. Something simple and nourishing that required attention to preparation. I needed to think, but I also needed to remember what it felt like to take care of myself, to treat myself with the kind of respect my family apparently couldn't manage. As I chopped vegetables and heated oil in the pan, I thought about the last family gathering I'd attended. Marcus's birthday dinner 3 months ago. I'd brought a thoughtful gift, a first edition of a book he'd mentioned loving in college. But the conversation had revolved around his latest real estate deals and Sophia's growing social media following. When I'd mentioned a successful project I'd completed for a major Portland nonprofit, my mother had smiled vaguely and changed the subject to wedding plan. I'd left that dinner feeling invisible, like I was present but not really seen. Now I understood why. They didn't see me as a person with achievements and goals and feelings that mattered. They saw me as the family entertainer, valuable only for what I could provide them in terms of amusement or convenience. The vegetables sizzled in the pan, filling my apartment with the smell of garlic and herb. I added rice, then a splash of wine, watching the alcohol cook off in a brief flare of blue flame. This was real. This was mine. This was a life I'd built through my own efforts, in a space where I didn't have to perform or apologize for taking up room. My phone sat silent on the counter, and I was grateful for the absence of buzzing notifications. Tomorrow I would have to make a decision. Tonight, I just wanted to eat my dinner and remember what it felt like to exist without commentary. But even as I tried to focus on the present moment, questions kept surfacing. How long had they seen me this way? Had I missed signals over the years, or had this view of me developed gradually, like a photograph slowly coming into focus in a dark room? And more troubling still, how much of their perception had I internalized? When had I started thinking of myself as someone who should be grateful for any kind of attention, even negative attention? I ate slowly, tasting each bite, reminding myself that I deserved nourishment and care and consideration. Outside my window, Portland continued its evening rhythm, unaware of the small domestic drama playing out in my apartment. But inside, something was shifting. Some fundamental assumption about family loyalty and unconditional acceptance beginning to crack open like an egg that had been under pressure too long. Tomorrow I would have to decide whether to put on a jester costume, or find the courage to disappoint people who claim to love me. Tonight, I just wanted to remember who I was when I wasn't trying to make anyone else laugh. The morning of my decision arrived gray and drizzling, typical Portland weather that matched my mood perfectly. I'd spent most of the night staring at the ceiling, turning the conversation with my family over and over in my mind, like a stone worn smooth by obsessive handling. By 6 a.m., I'd given up on sleep entirely and made coffee strong enough to fuel a construction crew. The jester costume had arrived as promised, delivered in a discreet brown box that sat unopened on my dining table like an unwelcome guest. I'd carried it up from the lobby the night before, feeling the weight of sequins and bells through the cardboard, and left it there while I figured out what to do with it. Now, in the pale morning light filtering through my windows, the box looked even more ominous. I approached it the way you might approach a wild animal, cautious and ready to retreat. The return address read, Costume Kingdom in cheerful purple letters, and someone had written Rush Delivery, Wedding Emergency, across the top in red marker, Wedding Emergency, as if my willingness to humiliate myself was a crisis that required immediate intervention. I opened the box with surgical precision, folding back the tissue paper to reveal royal blue and gold fabric that shimmered under my kitchen light. The costume was exactly as Marcus had described. Well-made and expensive-looking, complete with a matching hat adorned with bells that would announce my presence with every step. Underneath the main outfit, wrapped in separate tissue, was the sign they'd commissioned. Here comes the family disappointment, proclaimed the wooden placard in elaborate script, surrounded by painted flourishes that would have been beautiful if they weren't advertising my failure. Someone had spent time on this, carefully crafting each letter, adding decorative elements that turned my humiliation into art. I held the sign up to the light, studying the craftsmanship. Whoever had made this was talented, probably a local artist trying to make ends meet, by taking whatever commissions came their way. They'd created something beautiful that was designed to destroy me, and they'd probably never know the difference. My phone rang, jolting me from my examination of the sign. Sophia's name appeared on the screen, accompanied by a photo from her Instagram account where she posed in perfect lighting with a latte that probably cost more than my monthly coffee budget. Taylor, good morning, sunshine. I hope you're as excited as I am about tonight. Tonight, the rehearsal dinner, where we'd run through the ceremony and I'd presumably practice my entrance as the family joke. I'd forgotten about that particular layer of this nightmare. Hi, Sophia. I'm calling about the costume. Isn't it gorgeous? I spent hours finding the perfect one. The color is going to be amazing against the garden backdrop, and the photographer is already planning special shots just for your entrance. This is going to be such a unique element for our wedding album. Unique element, like I was a decorative vase or an unusual flower arrangement, something to add visual interest to their perfect day. Sophia, I need to ask you something, and I want an honest answer. Do you really think this is a good idea? There was a pause, the kind that stretches just long enough to become uncomfortable. In the background I could hear what sounded like a coffee grinder and the distant chatter of a busy cafe. Taylor, honey, of course it's a good idea. We wouldn't have suggested it if we didn't think it would be perfect for you. You're going to be the star of the whole ceremony. Everyone's going to remember you. Everyone's going to remember me, dressed as a jester carrying a sign about being a disappointment. Everyone's going to remember how brave and fun you were, how willing you were to do something different for people you love. Taylor, I have to tell you, when Marcus first suggested this, I wasn't sure, but then I thought about it, and I realized this is exactly the kind of thing that makes our family special. We're not boring. We're not conventional. We're memorable. I walked to my window and looked out at the river, where early morning joggers were already making their way along the waterfront path despite the drizzle. They looked focused and purposeful, like people who knew where they were going and why. Sophia, what if I said another pause, this one longer? When she spoke again, her voice had changed, the cheerful sweetness replaced by something cooler and more calculated. Taylor, I really hope you're not going to make this difficult. We've already told everyone about the surprise element. The photographer has adjusted his timeline. The videographer is planning specific shots. Marcus has been so excited about this, talking about how his sister is going to make our wedding unforgettable. And if I don't want to be unforgettable then I guess I'd have to wonder why you agreed to be part of our wedding in the first place. I mean, we could have just invited you as a regular guest, but we thought you'd want to be special, to have a role that was uniquely yours. But if you're not interested in being part of our special day, maybe it's better if you just sit in the audience with everyone else. The threat was politely delivered but unmistakable. Participate in your own humiliation or be excluded entirely. I felt something cold settle in my stomach, a recognition that this conversation was revealing more about my family dynamics than years of therapy might have accomplished. I need more time to think about it. Taylor, the rehearsal is tonight. We need to practice your entrance, work out the timing with the music, make sure everything flows smoothly. You can't just decide at the last minute. I know what tonight is. Then you know we need an answer now. The whole wedding party is counting on you. My parents are flying in from San Francisco specifically, because Marcus told them about this unique element. We can't disappoint them. We can't disappoint them. Not me. Not my feelings. Not my dignity in them. The people who mattered. The people whose opinions carried weight in this equation where I was apparently just a variable to be managed. I'll call you back, I said, and hung up before she could protest. I set the phone down and looked at the costumes spread across my dining table. Royal blue fabric, catching the light like trapped water. The bells on the hat moved slightly in the air current from my heating system, creating tiny chiming sounds that seemed to mock me with their cheerfulness. This was the moment. Not tonight at the rehearsal, not tomorrow at the wedding, but right now in my quiet apartment, with rain pattering against the windows and the city waking up around me. This was when I had to decide who I was going to be. I picked up my laptop and opened a new email. The cursor blinked in the empty message field, waiting for me to find the words that would either cement my role as the family entertainer, or begin the process of claiming something different for myself. The email took me 3 tries to write. The first version was too angry, full of accusations and hurt feelings that would give them ammunition to dismiss me as oversensitive. The second was too apologetic, so full of qualifications and explanations that it undermined its own message. The third attempt felt right, clear and direct without being cruel. Marcus, Sophia, Mom and Dad, I began. After thinking carefully about the jester costume and sign, I've decided I won't be participating in the wedding ceremony in that capacity. I'm honored that you wanted me to be part of your special day, but I'm not comfortable with the role you've outlined. I'll be happy to attend as a guest and celebrate your marriage in that way. I hope you understand. Love, Taylor. I read it over 5 times, checking for any weakness they could exploit, any opening they could use to convince me to change my mind. Then I added their email addresses and hovered my cursor over the send button. The apartment felt very quiet around me, as if the building itself was holding its breath. Outside, Portland continued its morning routine, oblivious to the small domestic drama playing out behind my window. But inside, time seemed suspended in that moment between decision and action, between the life I'd been living and whatever came next. I clicked send. The email disappeared from my screen, traveling through fiber optic cables to reach phones and computers across the city, carrying my refusal into their carefully planned world. There was no taking it back now, no way to soften the blow or cushion the impact. I'd said no, clearly and finally, and now I had to live with whatever consequences followed. My phone rang within minutes. Marcus, of course, probably calling from his downtown office, where he managed million-dollar real estate deals with the same intensity he brought to family manipulation. Taylor, what the hell is this email? Are you seriously backing out 2 days before the wedding? I'm not backing out of the wedding, I'm backing out of being your entertainment. Entertainment? Jesus, Taylor, is that really what you think this is about? We're trying to include you in something special, something that'll make you part of the story, and you're acting like we're asking you to humiliate yourself. You are asking me to humiliate myself. You want me to dress as a jester and carry a sign calling myself a disappointment so people will laugh at me before you exchange vows. You're being dramatic. It's a fun moment, a way to lighten the mood before the serious part. People will love it. They'll think it's clever and original. People will think I'm pathetic. People will think you're confident enough to laugh at yourself. Do you know how rare that is? Most people are so uptight about their image, but you've always been different. You've never cared what people think. I sat down heavily in my desk chair, struck by the casual cruelty of that statement. I'd never cared what people think, as if my willingness to be the butt of family jokes was a character strength rather than a survival mechanism, as if years of accepting scraps of attention disguised as affection had made me immune to shame rather than desperately hungry for approval. Marcus, when did I become the person who doesn't deserve respect? What are you talking about? We respect you. We're giving you a special role in the most important day of my life. How is that not respect? A special role is a joke. Marcus, when's the last time you asked me about my work? When's the last time you showed any interest in my life, beyond how I can serve your needs? There was a pause, and I could hear him breathing, probably trying to figure out how to redirect this conversation back to his agenda. Taylor, I don't know what's gotten into you lately, but this isn't the time for whatever identity crisis you're having. This is about my wedding, about supporting your family when we need you. If you can't do this one simple thing for us, then maybe we need to have a bigger conversation about what family means to you. The threat was there again, wrapped in concern but unmistakable in its implication. Comply or be cast out, perform or be excluded, sacrifice your dignity or lose your place at the table. Maybe we do need to have that conversation, I said quietly. Fine, but not now. Now you need to put on the costume and show up to rehearsal tonight. We'll sort out your feelings later, after the wedding, when we have time to deal with whatever's going on with you. After the wedding, when it would be too late to matter, when I'd either have submitted to their demands, or made myself the villain of their love story, when the damage would be done, and the photos would be posted, and my humiliation would be preserved forever in their wedding album. I'm not coming to rehearsal as a jester, Marcus. I'll come as myself, or not at all. Then don't come at all. The line went dead, leaving me holding a silent phone in an apartment that suddenly felt very empty. Outside, the rain had intensified, drumming against my windows with the kind of steady rhythm that usually comforted me. Today it sounded like applause for a performance I'd refused to give. I set the phone aside and looked at the costume again, spread across my table like the skin of some mythical creature that had died in captivity. The bells caught the light, and threw it back in tiny rainbows, beautiful and mocking in equal measure. My laptop chimed with a new email notification. Mom, this time with a subject line that read, disappointed and confused. I opened it with the same reluctance I'd shown the costume box. Taylor, I just got off the phone with Marcus, and I have to say I'm shocked by your behavior. After everything this family has done for you, after all the opportunities we've given you to be special and included, you're choosing to be selfish and difficult at the worst possible time. I raised you better than this. The costume is beautiful, the idea is creative and fun, and your refusal to participate is going to hurt people who love you. I hope you'll reconsider before you do permanent damage to relationships that matter. This isn't like you, sweetheart. The Taylor I know would never let her family down this way. Love, Mom. I read it twice, looking for any acknowledgement that they were asking me to do something degrading, any recognition that my feelings might be valid. Instead, I found disappointment and manipulation, a carefully crafted message designed to make me feel guilty for refusing to be their punchline. The Taylor I know would never let her family down this way. But what if the Taylor they knew was someone I'd outgrown? What if the person who would put on a jester costume and smile while people laughed at her pain was someone I didn't want to be anymore? I closed the laptop and walked to my bedroom, where I kept a small jewelry box on my dresser. Inside, underneath earrings and necklaces I rarely wore, was a business card that had been given to me 6 months ago at a networking event. Daniel Martinez, attorney at law, specializing in family disputes and personal injury cases. He'd mentioned during our brief conversation that he handled a variety of legal issues, including harassment and emotional distress cases. At the time, I'd tucked his card away thinking I might refer clients to him if they needed legal help with contracts or intellectual property issues. Now I looked at it with different eyes, wondering what constituted harassment when it came from family members, what legal recourse existed for emotional damage inflicted by people who claimed to love you. I wasn't ready to make that call yet, but I kept the card in my hand as I returned to the living room. Outside my window, Portland continued its Saturday routine. People living their lives without drama or ultimatums, without having to choose between dignity and family acceptance. My phone buzzed with a text from Logan. Heard you're bailing on the wedding thing. Pretty selfish, but whatever. Don't expect us to pretend this is okay. Another text followed immediately. Also, hope you know this means you're probably not invited to family stuff anymore. Actions have consequences. I stared at the messages, struck by how quickly concern had transformed into punishment. Less than an hour after sending my email, they'd already moved from disappointment to threats. From trying to change my mind to warning me about the cost of my decision. This wasn't grief over a ruined wedding plan. This was anger that their entertainment had developed a backbone, frustration that their reliable source of amusement had suddenly become unreliable. They weren't mourning the loss of my participation in their special day. They were furious that I dared to value my own dignity over their convenience. I turned off my phone and set it aside, needing silence to process what was happening. The rain continued its steady percussion against my windows, and I found myself focusing on that sound, letting it anchor me in the present moment, instead of spiraling into anxiety about future consequences. The costume still lay spread across my dining table, but it looked different now, less like an obligation and more like evidence. Evidence of what they thought I was worth, what they believed I would accept, how little they understood about the person I'd become when they weren't watching. I had work to do, a logo design that needed finishing, invoices that needed sending, a business that required my attention, real work, meaningful work, the kind that didn't involve bells or signs or public humiliation. I gathered up the costume pieces and folded them carefully back into their box, then carried the whole thing to my closet where I stored things I didn't need but wasn't ready to discard. Someday maybe, I'd be able to look at that royal blue fabric and remember it as the moment I chose myself over their version of family loyalty. Today, I just needed it out of sight while I figured out how to be the person who said no and meant it. The apartment felt different with the costume gone, lighter somehow, as if removing that possibility had made room for other options I hadn't been able to see before. I made fresh coffee and opened my laptop, ready to focus on work that mattered, on creating things that helped rather than harmed, on being the person I was when I wasn't trying to make anyone else laugh. Outside, Portland carried on with its weekend, and I carried on with mine, one choice at a time, one small act of self-respect building towards something larger I couldn't quite name yet, but was finally ready to discover. The wedding day arrived with unseasonable sunshine, the kind of perfect Portland morning that makes locals forget about 9 months of rain and tourists understand why people fall in love with the city despite its reputation for gloom. I watched the light stream through my apartment windows while drinking coffee that had grown cold during my third attempt to focus on weekend work projects. My phone had been mercifully quiet since I'd turned it back on an hour ago, though the silence felt more ominous than peaceful. In my experience, when my family stopped trying to change my mind, it usually meant they'd moved on to more creative forms of persuasion. I was right. The knock on my door came at 10:30, 3 soft raps that somehow managed to sound both polite and insistent. Through the peephole I could see my cousin Ashley Kim standing in the hallway, holding what appeared to be a coffee carrier and wearing the kind of sympathetic expression usually reserved for hospital visits. Ashley and I had been close as children, bonding over our shared status as family outliers. She was the artist to my humor, the one who painted instead of performing, who'd managed to carve out a space for herself that commanded respect rather than laughter. If they'd sent her, it meant they were pulling out their most effective ammunition. "Taylor, honey, can we talk? I brought coffee from that place you love on Hawthorne." I opened the door despite every instinct telling me not to. Ashley stepped inside with the careful movements of someone entering a crime scene, her eyes immediately finding the dining table where the jester costume box had been sitting just hours before. "Where's the outfit?" she asked, settling onto my couch with the practiced ease of someone who'd spent countless childhood afternoons in various living rooms, mediating family disputes with the diplomatic skills of a born peacekeeper. "In my closet, I'm not wearing it." Ashley nodded slowly, as if this information confirmed something she'd already suspected. She handed me a cup from the carrier and I recognized the logo from Stumptown Coffee, the kind of expensive gesture that signaled serious conversation. "They're really upset, Taylor. I mean really upset." Marcus spent the morning calling everyone in the family, explaining that you've decided not to participate in the wedding ceremony. Your mom hasn't stopped crying since last night. I sat down across from her, wrapping my hands around the warm cup and breathing in the familiar smell of perfectly roasted beans. Ashley had good taste and a generous heart, which made her the ideal messenger for this particular mission. What exactly did Marcus tell everyone? That you'd agreed to be part of the ceremony, and then changed your mind at the last minute? That you're having some kind of personal crisis and taking it out on the family during the most important day of his life? That they tried to give you a special role and you rejected it because you'd rather sulk than celebrate? I took a sip of coffee, noting the bitter undertone that no amount of expert roasting could completely eliminate. And what do you think about that version of events? Ashley shifted uncomfortably, her gaze moving from my face to the window and back again. I think there's probably more to the story. There always is with family stuff. But Taylor, whatever happened, whatever they asked you to do, is it really worth destroying relationships over? Is it worth making Marcus's wedding day about your hurt feelings? The question hit like a physical blow, not because it was cruel but because it was so perfectly calibrated to make me doubt myself. Ashley wasn't trying to manipulate me the way Marcus and Sophia had. She genuinely believed that family harmony was worth almost any personal sacrifice, that keeping the peace was more important than individual dignity. Ashley, what if I told you they wanted me to dress as a court jester and carry a sign calling myself the family disappointment? Her coffee cup paused halfway to her lips, and for a moment, I saw surprise flicker across her features before the diplomatic mask slipped back into place. I'm sure it wasn't meant to be hurtful. You know how Marcus is, always going for the big gesture, the memorable moment. He probably thought it would be funny, something people would talk about, something people would laugh at, something that would make you the center of attention. Taylor, I know you think they don't appreciate you, but maybe this was their way of making sure you felt included, making sure you had a moment that was all yours. I set my cup down carefully, struck by how easily family members could reframe cruelty as kindness, how quickly humiliation could be rebranded as inclusion. Ashley, if someone asked you to dress as a clown and announce your failures at your next gallery opening, would you call that inclusion? That's different. That's my career, my professional reputation, and this is my personal dignity. Why is that worth less? Ashley looked genuinely troubled by the question, and I could see her struggling to reconcile her loyalty to family peace with her growing understanding of what they'd actually asked me to do. She'd always been the one who tried to see all sides, who looked for compromise and middle ground, but even her diplomatic skills were being tested by this situation. Taylor, I'm not saying what they asked was perfect. Maybe they could have found a better way to include you, but walking away entirely, refusing to be part of Marcus's wedding at all, that seems like an overreaction. Can't you find some middle ground? Maybe suggest an alternative. I suggested attending as a guest, celebrating their marriage without putting on a costume. They told me not to come at all. This information seemed to surprise her more than the jester costume had. Ashley prided herself on knowing family dynamics, on being the one who could navigate complicated relationships and find solutions that worked for everyone. The idea that they'd issued an ultimatum rather than seeking compromise didn't fit her worldview. They said that? Really? Marcus told me not to come if I wouldn't wear the costume. Mom sent an email saying I was selfish and disappointing. Logan texted me about consequences and not being invited to family events anymore. Ashley was quiet for a long moment, staring into her coffee as if it might contain answers to questions she was just beginning to understand how to ask. When she looked up, something had shifted in her expression, a crack in the diplomatic facade that usually governed her family interaction. Taylor, can I ask you something, and will you give me an honest answer? Always. How long have they been treating you this way? The question caught me off guard, partly because I hadn't expected Ashley to make that leap, and partly because I wasn't sure how to answer it. When does casual dismissal become systematic devaluation? When do family jokes cross the line into emotional abuse? When does being the entertaining one become being the sacrificial one? I don't know exactly. It happened gradually, I think. Little things that seemed normal at the time, but add up to something bigger when you look back. Like what? I walked to my kitchen window, looking out at the city spread below us, thinking about all the small moments that had led to this larger crisis. Like being introduced as the spirited one while Marcus was just my son. Like having my achievements ignored while his were celebrated. Like being expected to be grateful for attention even when it came at my expense. And you never said anything? I tried, but it was always dismissed as me being too sensitive, or not understanding the joke, or not appreciating how much they loved me. After a while you start to think, maybe they're right, maybe you are too sensitive, maybe this is just how families work. Ashley nodded slowly, and I could see her processing this information against her own family experiences, looking for patterns she might have missed or dismissed. Taylor, I need to tell you something, and I hope you won't take it the wrong way. What? I used to be jealous of you. The admission hung in the air between us, unexpected and somehow both flattering and heartbreaking at the same time. Jealous of me? Why? Because you always seemed so confident, so sure of yourself. You'd make jokes and everyone would laugh, and you never seemed to care what people thought. I spent so much energy trying to be perfect, trying to make sure no one had anything to criticize, and there you were just being yourself and seeming so comfortable with it. I turned back to face her, struck by how completely she'd misunderstood what she was seeing. Ashley, I wasn't comfortable with it. I was performing. There's a difference between confidence and desperation, between not caring what people think, and being so hungry for approval that you'll accept any kind of attention. But you always seemed so happy. I was happy to be noticed. I was happy to matter, even if it was only as entertainment. When you're starving, crumbs feel like a feast. The words came out more raw than I'd intended, and I could see Ashley absorbing their impact, recognizing something in my experience that resonated with her own complicated relationship with family expectations. God, Taylor, I'm so sorry. I never realized. It's not your fault. I got good at hiding it, good at making it look like a choice instead of a survival mechanism. But Ashley, the jester costume isn't just about one embarrassing moment, it's about finally admitting that I deserve better than crumbs. We sat in comfortable silence for a while, the coffee growing cold while we both processed what felt like a fundamental shift in understanding. Outside my window, Portland continued its Saturday routine, people moving through their lives with the kind of purpose I was still learning to claim for myself. What are you going to do? Ashley asked eventually. I don't know. For now, I'm going to work on a project that actually matters, maybe take a walk along the river, remember what it feels like to exist without an audience, and tonight, during the tonight I'm going to order takeout and watch Netflix and not think about royal blue costumes or family disappointment. Ashley smiled, the first genuine expression I'd seen from her since she arrived. That sounds perfect. Actually, mind if I join you? I think I might be coming down with something contagious, something that prevents me from attending weddings where people are expected to humiliate themselves for entertainment. The offer surprised me, both because Ashley rarely missed family events, and because it meant she was willing to risk her own standing in the family peacekeeping hierarchy to support me. Are you sure? They're going to be upset with you too. Let them be upset. I've spent 30 years trying to keep everyone happy, and you know what I've learned. Some people don't want to be happy. They want to be right. They want to be in control. They want to have someone to blame when things don't go perfectly. I'm tired of enabling that. We spent the rest of the morning talking about families and expectations, about the difference between love and performance, about what it meant to build a life that felt authentic rather than acceptable. Ashley shared stories about her own struggles with family dynamics, times when her artistic pursuits were dismissed as hobbies, moments when she'd compromised her vision to avoid conflict. By noon, we'd finished our coffee and moved on to planning our evening of rebellion. Ashley suggested Thai food and documentaries, the kind of Saturday night that prioritized comfort over sophistication, that celebrated the radical act of choosing ourselves over other people's expectations. Around 2 o'clock, my phone started buzzing with increasing frequency. Text messages from relatives I hadn't heard from in months, all expressing concern about my situation and hoping I'd reconsider my decision. The messages followed a predictable pattern, starting with gentle encouragement and escalating to guilt and disappointment as it became clear I wouldn't be swayed. Taylor, this is Aunt Linda. I heard you're having second thoughts about participating in Marcus's wedding. I know family can be complicated, but I hope you'll find a way to be there for your brother on his special day. Honey, it's Uncle Jim. Your mom is really upset about this wedding thing. Whatever's going on between you kids, maybe it's time to be the bigger person and work it out. Taylor, this is Cousin Michelle. I don't know what happened, but Marcus is really hurt. Family is all we have, sweetheart. Don't let pride get in the way of love. I showed the messages to Ashley, who read them with increasing irritation. They're mobilizing the extended family. That's a new low, even for them. Standard operating procedure actually. When direct pressure doesn't work, they bring in the relatives to apply guilt from multiple angles, and they all just go along with it, without asking for your side of the story. They've been told I'm having a crisis, that I'm being selfish and difficult. Why would they question that narrative? It's easier to believe I'm the problem than to acknowledge that the family golden boy might be capable of cruelty. Ashley shook her head, her artist eye for composition apparently extending to family dynamics. It's like a coordinated campaign. They're all using the same language, the same talking points, because they're all getting the same script from Marcus and Mom. Taylor is being difficult, she's hurting the family. Someone needs to talk sense into her before she does permanent damage. My phone buzzed again, this time with a call from a number I didn't recognize. I let it go to voicemail, then listened to the message on speaker so Ashley could hear. Hi Taylor, this is Father Mackenzie from St. Mary's, where Marcus and Sophia will be married this evening. Your mother asked me to call because she's concerned about your spiritual well-being. She mentioned that you're struggling with family relationships and wondered if you might benefit from counseling or prayer. Please know that God calls us to forgiveness and reconciliation, especially with our family. I hope you'll reconsider whatever decision has caused this rift, and find your way back to the people who love you. Ashley's mouth fell open. They got a priest to call you. A priest? Apparently I'm not just selfish and difficult, I'm also spiritually deficient. This is insane. Taylor, this level of pressure, this coordinated effort to make you feel guilty for setting a boundary, this isn't normal family dysfunction, this is something else entirely. I'd been thinking the same thing all morning, but hearing Ashley say it out loud made it feel more real, more serious. This wasn't just hurt feelings over a ruined wedding plan, this was a systematic campaign to break down my resistance, to make the cost of maintaining my dignity so high that I'd eventually surrender just to make it stop. Ashley, can I ask you something? Do you think I'm overreacting? Do you think a normal person would just put on the costume and get it over with? She looked at me for a long moment, and I could see her weighing her words carefully, understanding that her answer mattered more than polite reassurance. I think a normal person shouldn't have to put on a costume that degrades them to prove their love for their family. I think a normal family wouldn't ask that in the first place. And I think the fact that they're pulling out every manipulation tactic they can think of instead of just accepting your decision tells you everything you need to know about their priorities. The validation hit harder than I'd expected, bringing tears I'd been holding back for days. Ashley moved to sit beside me on the couch, offering the kind of physical comfort that came without conditions or expectation. Taylor, what if this isn't about the wedding at all? What if this is about power, about keeping you in the role they've assigned you, about making sure you don't get any ideas about deserving better treatment? The question crystallized something I'd been feeling but couldn't articulate. This wasn't grief over a missed opportunity or disappointment about a changed plan. This was fury that their reliable source of entertainment had developed agency. Panic that their designated scapegoat might no longer be available for duty. What if they've been doing this all along, and I just never recognized it? Then recognizing it now is the first step toward changing it. My phone buzzed with another text, this one from a number I didn't recognize but a name that made my stomach drop. Sophia's mother, reaching out from San Francisco with her own version of the guilt script. Taylor, dear, Sophia is devastated about your decision not to participate in the wedding ceremony. She's been crying all morning, worried that she's somehow offended you. Please don't let whatever misunderstanding has occurred ruin what should be the happiest day of her life. Family means forgiveness, sweetheart. I hope you'll find it in your heart to be there for them. I showed the message to Ashley, who read it with undisguised disgust. They've got Sophia's mother involved now. How many people are they going to drag into this? As many as it takes. The goal isn't to change my mind anymore, it's to make me so overwhelmed by pressure that I'll give in just to make it stop. And if you don't give in, then I become the villain of their story permanently. The selfish sister who ruined Marcus's wedding, the ungrateful daughter who chose pride over family, the difficult person who couldn't just go along to get along. Ashley was quiet for a moment, processing the implications of what I'd just said. Taylor, what if being the villain in their story is better than being the victim in your own? The question hung in the air between us, profound and terrifying in its simplicity. What if the cost of their approval was too high? What if the price of belonging was pieces of myself I couldn't afford to lose? Outside my window, Portland sparkled in the afternoon sunshine, the city spread out like a promise of possibilities I hadn't yet learned to imagine. Somewhere across town, my family was preparing for a wedding that would go on without me, adjusting their timeline and their expectations, probably already crafting the narrative that would explain my absence. But here in my apartment, surrounded by the life I'd built for myself, with a cousin who was willing to risk family displeasure to support my decision, I felt something I hadn't experienced in years of family gatherings and holiday performances. I felt free. The first video appeared on social media at 7:30 that evening, just as the wedding ceremony was concluding. Ashley and I were halfway through our pad thai and a documentary about ocean conservation, when my phone lit up with notifications. Instagram, Facebook, TikTok, all pinging simultaneously with tags and mentions that made my stomach clench with dread. "Don't look," Ashley said, reaching for my phone. "Whatever it is, it can wait until tomorrow." But I was already opening Instagram, drawn by the same morbid curiosity that makes people slow down at accident scenes. The first post was from Sophia's account, a carefully curated shot of her and Marcus exchanging vows under an arch of white roses and greenery. The caption read, "Despite last-minute family drama, we said yes to forever. Some people couldn't put aside their personal issues for love, but we're surrounded by the family that truly matters. Brooke's wedding. Choosing love. Real family." The comments below were a mix of congratulations and speculation. What happened? Family drama. Some people are so heart emojis and wedding cake emojis punctuated expressions of support and subtle digs at unnamed troublemakers who couldn't celebrate love properly. Ashley peered over my shoulder, reading the caption with increasing incredulity. "Personal issue. They're calling your refusal to be humiliated a personal issue." I scrolled down to the next post, this one from Marcus's account. A group photo of the wedding party, all smiles and coordinated colors, with a conspicuous gap where I presumably would have stood in my jester costume. When family lets you down, chosen family steps up. Grateful for the people who showed up today with love instead of selfishness. Wedding day. True loyalty. Moving forward. Chosen family, Ashley muttered. As if you weren't born into this mess like the rest of us. But it was the third post that made my hands shake. A video, uploaded to TikTok by Logan, showing footage from what appeared to be the wedding reception. The caption read, "When your sister cares more about being dramatic than celebrating family, the empty chair says it all. Family first. Wedding drama. Disappointed." The video showed my assigned seat at what would have been the family table, empty except for a small placard that read, "Reserved for Taylor Brooks." But someone had crossed out my name with red marker and written "absent by choice" underneath. The camera lingered on the empty chair while upbeat wedding music played in the background, turning my absence into a performance piece designed to highlight my supposed selfishness. "They're making your empty chair part of the entertainment," Ashley said, her voice tight with anger. "They're literally using your absence as content." I kept scrolling, finding more posts from various relatives and family friends, all telling slightly different versions of the same story. Poor Marcus and Sophia, dealing with family drama on their special day. Mysterious sister who couldn't put aside her issues for love. Wedding that went on beautifully despite disappointing behavior from people who should have known better. The narrative was clear and consistent, clearly coordinated to present a united front. I was the villain who had abandoned my family in their moment of celebration, the difficult person who had chosen pride over love, the sister who couldn't handle not being the center of attention. What they didn't show was the jester costume. What they didn't mention was the sign I was supposed to carry. What they didn't explain was that my personal issues consisted of refusing to humiliate myself for their entertainment. The real story was missing entirely, replaced by a carefully crafted fiction that painted them as victims of my unreasonable behavior. "Taylor, you need to see this," Ashley said, holding up her own phone. "They're not just posting about the wedding, they're posting about you." She showed me a Facebook post from my mother, published just an hour earlier. The text was longer than her usual social media updates, clearly written with careful consideration and maximum emotional impact. "It breaks my heart to write this, but sometimes we have to share our pain to help others understand the challenges families face. Today should have been a day of pure joy, celebrating my son Marcus and his beautiful bride, Sophia. Instead, we're dealing with the heartbreak of a family member who chose to prioritize her own hurt feelings over love and support. Taylor has always been a free spirit, and we've celebrated that about her, but sometimes that independence crosses into selfishness. We offered her a special role in the ceremony, something unique and memorable, but she decided it wasn't good enough for her. We're praying for healing and hoping she'll find her way back to the values we tried to instill in her. Family forgiveness is always possible, but it requires humility and growth. Please keep us in your thoughts during this difficult time. Family struggle, unconditional love, praying for healing." The post had dozens of comments already, friends and acquaintances offering support and sympathy to my grieving mother. "So sorry you're going through this. Family can be so difficult. You raised her right. This isn't your fault." "Praying for your daughter to come to her senses." Ashley set her phone down with a sharp exhale. "They're not just angry that you didn't participate, they're destroying your reputation to make themselves look better." I felt something cold and heavy settle in my chest as I realized the full scope of what was happening. This wasn't just about the wedding anymore. This was a character assassination, a coordinated campaign to rewrite history and paint me as an unstable, selfish person who had hurt her loving family for no good reason. They're making sure that if anyone asks questions, they already have the answers. If anyone wonders why I wasn't at the wedding, they can point to these posts and say, "I was being difficult and dramatic." But people who know you will see through this, right? Your friends, your clients, people who actually understand who you are. I scrolled through the comments on my mother's post, looking for any sign of skepticism or support. Instead, I found a parade of agreement and sympathy. People who had known me peripherally for years accepting this version of events, without question. Miss Peterson from down the street, who had always complimented my garden when she walked her dog. Several parents from the neighborhood kids I used to babysit. Even Sarah Chen, a client whose nonprofit logo I had designed just 6 months earlier. "So sorry, Vanessa. Family is everything, and it's heartbreaking when someone can't see that." Praying Taylor finds her way back to what really matters. The betrayal of that comment hit harder than the family post. Sarah had hired me specifically because she said my work demonstrated both creativity and professionalism. She had recommended me to other organizations, praised my reliability and insight. But faced with my mother's carefully crafted narrative, she had immediately accepted that I was the kind of person who would abandon family over petty grievances. "They're good at this," I said, my voice sounding strange and distant to my own ear. "They know exactly how to tell the story to make themselves look sympathetic and me look unstable." Ashley took my phone and set it aside, forcing me to look at her instead of the endless stream of social media judgment. "Taylor, listen to me. This is what abusers do. They isolate their victims by controlling the narrative, by making sure everyone else sees the victim as the problem. They're not just angry that you set a boundary, they're panicking because you're threatening their ability to control you. But what if they're right? What if I am being selfish and dramatic? What if normal people would have just put on the costume and gotten over it? Normal people don't have to put on costumes that degrade them. Normal families don't launch social media campaigns against their own children. Taylor, everything they're doing right now is proving that you made the right decision." I wanted to believe her, but the weight of all those comments, all those expressions of sympathy for my poor suffering family, made it hard to trust my own judgment. When dozens of people are telling you that you're wrong, when your own mother is publicly grieving your behavior, it becomes difficult to maintain confidence in your perspective. My phone buzzed with a text from Daniel Martinez, the lawyer whose card I still had in my pocket. I had contacted him earlier that afternoon, not because I was ready to take legal action, but because I needed to understand what options existed if this situation continued to escalate. Taylor, I've been monitoring the social media posts you mentioned. Can we schedule a call for tomorrow morning? I think we need to discuss this situation more seriously than we originally planned. Ashley read the message over my shoulder. What did you tell him? Just that my family was pressuring me to do something humiliating at a wedding, and I was concerned about potential harassment. I didn't think it would escalate this quickly, this level of public defamation, especially if it affects your business or professional reputation, could constitute actionable harm. Taylor, they're not just hurting your feelings anymore, they're potentially damaging your livelihood. The thought hadn't occurred to me, but as I considered it, I realized she was right. My design business depended on referrals and reputation, on clients trusting me to represent their organizations professionally. If this narrative spread, if potential clients started seeing me as someone who abandoned family obligations or created drama, it could genuinely impact my ability to earn a living. My phone rang, startling both of us. Rachel's name appeared on the screen, and I answered gratefully, desperate to hear from someone outside the family drama. Taylor, what the hell is happening? I'm seeing all these posts about you being selfish and dramatic, but they're not explaining what you supposedly did. Are you okay? I filled her in on the jester costume, the family pressure, my refusal to participate, and the current social media campaign. Rachel listened without interrupting, occasionally making sounds of disbelief or disgust. They wanted you to dress as a jester and carry a sign about being a disappointment, and when you said no, they decided to publicly shame you. Taylor, this is insane, but am I wrong? Should I have just done it to keep the peace? Absolutely not. Taylor, I've seen your work. I know who you are as a person. You're thoughtful and professional and kind. The idea that you would create family drama for no reason is ridiculous. If they're this angry about you setting a basic boundary, it tells you everything you need to know about how they've been treating you. But all these people are commenting, agreeing with them, saying I should have put family first. All these people don't know what they asked you to do. They're responding to a carefully edited version of events designed to make your family look like victim. Taylor, if your mother had posted, "We asked Taylor to dress as a jester and carry a sign calling herself a disappointment," and she refused, do you think the comments would be the same? The point was obvious once Rachel stated it, but I'd been so overwhelmed by the volume of criticism that I hadn't thought clearly about what information people were actually responding to. They weren't supporting the jester costume idea because they didn't know about it. They were supporting a vague notion of family loyalty in the face of unexplained drama. What should I do? Document everything. Screenshot all the posts and comments. Keep records of every text message and voicemail, and call that lawyer back. This isn't just family dysfunction anymore, Taylor. This is a targeted harassment campaign, and you need to protect yourself. After we hung up, Ashley and I spent the next hour systematically documenting the social media campaign, screenshots of posts, comments, shares, the gradual spread of the narrative across multiple platforms. The empty chair video had been shared dozens of times, accumulating comments that ranged from supportive to vicious. Some people are so entitled they think they can ruin other people's special days. Family is everything. This sister sounds incredibly We need more details, but if someone can't show up for their own brother's wedding, there's something seriously wrong with them. The pattern was consistent across platforms. My family had crafted a story that generated maximum sympathy, while providing minimum information about what actually happened. They had turned my refusal to be humiliated into evidence of my fundamental character flaws, my boundary setting into proof of my selfishness. But as we documented the campaign, I noticed something else. A few comments, scattered among the supportive ones, expressing skepticism or asking for more information. This seems like only one side of the story. What actually happened? Family dynamics are usually more complicated than social media posts suggest. Something feels off about this. Why aren't they explaining what the sister actually did? These comments were quickly buried under waves of support for my family, but they were there, tiny cracks in the narrative foundation that suggested not everyone was accepting the story without question. "Look at this," Ashley said, pointing to a comment on Logan's TikTok video. "Someone noticed that they're not explaining what you supposedly did wrong." The comment read, "This is weird. Why are you showing an empty chair but not saying what your sister did? If she was really being unreasonable, wouldn't you want people to know what happened?" Logan had replied, "Family business should stay private. Some people just can't handle not being the center of attention." But even his response raised more questions than it answered. If the family business should stay private, why were they making it public? If I couldn't handle not being the center of attention, why was I avoiding a wedding where I would have been performing for 300 people? Their story doesn't hold up under scrutiny, Ashley observed. They're relying on people not asking too many questions, not thinking too carefully about what they're actually saying. As the evening wore on, we watched the social media narrative evolve in real time. New posts appeared, more relatives chimed in with their versions of disappointment and support for Marcus and Sophia. The story grew in the telling, accumulating details that hadn't been in the original posts. Suddenly I wasn't just someone who had skipped a wedding. I was someone with a history of causing drama. I wasn't just difficult. I was jealous of her brother's success. I wasn't just refusing to participate. I was attention-seeking and manipulative. Each embellishment moved further from reality, but the social media audience didn't know that. They were responding to an increasingly exaggerated fiction, and their outrage was feeding back into the family narrative, making them feel justified in their escalating attacks on my character. By 10 o'clock I was exhausted from monitoring the damage, from watching my reputation being systematically destroyed by people who claimed to love me. Ashley ordered us ice cream from a delivery app, the kind of comfort food that wouldn't solve anything but might provide temporary solace. "Tomorrow we call that lawyer," she said, settling beside me on the couch with 2 pints of salted caramel. "Tonight we eat ice cream and remember that social media isn't real life." But as I scrolled through one more round of posts, seeing my mother's grief performance accumulating likes and sympathetic comments, I couldn't shake the feeling that the line between social media and real life was blurrier than Ashley suggested. These posts were shaping people's opinions of me, potentially affecting my business, definitely changing my relationships with extended family and family friends. The wedding was over, but the real damage was just beginning. Daniel Martinez's office occupied the 15th floor of a sleek downtown building, with floor-to-ceiling windows that offered a panoramic view of the Willamette River and the mountains beyond. I sat across from his mahogany desk Monday morning, a thick folder of printed screenshots and documented evidence between us, feeling more nervous than I'd expected. "Taylor, I've reviewed everything you sent me, and I want you to understand that what your family has done crosses several legal lines," Daniel said, his voice carrying the measured authority of someone who'd handled similar cases before. "This isn't just family drama. This is defamation, intentional infliction of emotional distress, and potentially tortious interference with your business relationships." The legal terminology made it sound more serious than family dysfunction, more actionable than hurt feelings. I'd spent the weekend documenting the expanding social media campaign, watching as the narrative about my selfishness spread across multiple platforms and accumulated hundreds of supportive comments for my grieving family. "But they're my family," I said, voicing the doubt that had been nagging at me since I'd first contacted his office. "Can you really sue your own relatives? Family relationships don't exempt people from legal consequences for harmful behavior. If anything, the fact that they have intimate knowledge of your life and reputation makes their defamatory statements more damaging, not less." Daniel opened the folder and pulled out several screenshots. "Look at this objectively, Taylor. They've publicly accused you of being selfish, manipulative, attention-seeking, and mentally unstable. They've suggested you have a history of causing family drama. They've implied that your character is fundamentally flawed. But they haven't said anything technically false, have they? I mean, I did refuse to participate in the wedding. They've created a false narrative by omitting crucial information and adding inflammatory embellishments. Your mother's post specifically states that you were offered a special role that wasn't good enough for you, implying you rejected a reasonable request due to entitlement. She doesn't mention that the role involved dressing as a jester and carrying a sign announcing your failure." Daniel pulled out another screenshot. This one from Logan's TikTok account. Your brother has made multiple videos suggesting you have a pattern of dramatic behavior and attention-seeking. When questioned in the comments about what you actually did, he deflects rather than providing facts. This creates the impression that your behavior was so obviously wrong that it doesn't need explanation. I'd been so focused on the emotional impact of the posts that I hadn't considered the legal implications of their strategic omission. When viewed through Daniel's analytical lens, the campaign looked less like grief and more like calculated character assassination. What could we realistically accomplish with a lawsuit? First, we could seek monetary damages for the harm to your reputation and any resulting business losses. Second, we could obtain a cease and desist order requiring them to stop making defamatory statements. Third, and perhaps most importantly, we could force them to publicly correct the false narrative they've created. The idea of my family being legally required to tell the truth about what they'd asked me to do felt both satisfying and terrifying. What would that look like? We'd demand they post corrections on all platforms where they made false statements, explaining that you refused to dress as a jester and carry a humiliating sign, not that you simply rejected a reasonable family role. We'd require them to clarify that your absence was due to their unreasonable demands, not your character flaws. My phone buzzed with another notification, probably another post from a family member, or supportive comment from someone who'd bought into their victim narrative. I'd stopped reading them individually, but the constant stream of alerts served as a reminder that the damage was ongoing. There's something else, I said, pulling out my phone to show Daniel the latest development. They've started contacting my client. Over the weekend, I'd received forwarded emails from 2 current clients and 1 potential new client. All contained messages from my mother, reaching out under the guise of concern and family loyalty, but clearly designed to undermine my professional relationship. Daniel read the emails with increasing concern. The first was to Maria Santos, director of a local environmental nonprofit whose logo I was redesigning. Dear Maria, I hope you don't mind me reaching out, but I felt I should let you know that my daughter Taylor is going through a difficult time right now. She's been struggling with some personal issues that have affected her relationship with our family, and I'm worried they might be impacting her work as well. Taylor has always been talented, but she's been increasingly unstable and unreliable lately. I thought you should know in case you notice any changes in her behavior or work quality. As her mother, I just want to make sure she gets the help she needs. Please feel free to call me if you have any concerns. With love and worry, Vanessa Brooks. This is textbook tortious interference, Daniel said grimly. She's directly attempting to damage your business relationships by suggesting you're unstable and unreliable. The second email was worse, sent to a potential client who had contacted me about a major rebranding project. My mother had somehow found his contact information and reached out with concerns about my recent erratic behavior and suggestions that he might want to consider other designers until I got the help I needed. How did she even get these people's contact information? That's a good question. Have you ever shared client details with family members? I thought back over the past year, trying to remember conversations where I might have mentioned client names or projects. Sometimes I talked about work at family dinners, but I never gave out contact information. She must have looked them up online, found their websites or social media. That level of research and outreach shows premeditation. This isn't emotional reaction, Taylor. This is a calculated effort to damage your livelihood because you wouldn't comply with their demand. The realization hit me like cold water. My mother hadn't just been hurt by my wedding refusal, she'd been systematically working to destroy my professional reputation, to make the cost of defying the family so high that I'd have no choice but to surrender and apologize. What kind of damages could we seek? That depends on the extent of the harm. Have you lost any clients, or potential clients, as a result of these contacts? I thought about the potential client who had suddenly gone silent after initially expressing enthusiasm about working together. Maybe it's hard to prove causation, but there have been some projects that seemed promising and then just disappeared. We'll document everything, even if we can't prove specific monetary losses. The pattern of behavior is clear. Your family is engaged in a coordinated campaign to harm your reputation and interfere with your business relationships. Daniel leaned back in his chair, studying the evidence spread across his desk. Taylor, I need to ask you something, and I want you to think carefully about your answer. How far are you willing to take this? What do you mean? Litigation against family members is emotionally grueling, and often permanent. If we file this lawsuit, there's probably no going back to normal family relationships. Are you prepared for that? The question forced me to confront something I'd been avoiding. Part of me still harbored hope that this was all a terrible misunderstanding, that somehow we could find our way back to being a family once the wedding drama faded. But as I looked at the evidence of their coordinated campaign, their willingness to attack my livelihood, their absolute refusal to consider that they might have been wrong, I realized that hope was naive. They've already ended the family relationship, I said finally. I'm just refusing to pretend otherwise. Daniel nodded approvingly. That's the right attitude. Now let's talk strategy. We spent the next hour crafting a comprehensive legal response. The lawsuit would seek monetary damages for defamation and business interference, injunctive relief requiring them to stop making false statements, and corrective statements on all platforms where they'd spread their narrative. But Daniel also suggested a more immediate tactical approach. Before we filed the lawsuit, we sent a cease and desist letter, detailing their illegal behavior and demanding immediate corrections. Sometimes the threat of legal action is enough to make people reconsider their behavior, and if they ignore it, then we file the lawsuit and seek maximum damages. But the letter gives them one chance to make this right without involving the court. I authorized him to send the cease and desist letter that afternoon, requiring my family to stop making defamatory statements, cease contacting my clients, and post public corrections within 7 days. If they complied, we'd consider the matter resolved. If they ignored the letter or escalated their behavior, we'd proceed with full litigation. The letter was delivered electronically to ensure immediate receipt and create a clear timeline for their response. Daniel sent copies to Marcus, Sophia, my parents, and Logan, making it clear that they were all potentially liable for the coordinated campaign. I left his office feeling simultaneously empowered and exhausted. For the first time since this ordeal began, I was taking active steps to protect myself, rather than simply enduring their attacks. But I also knew that crossing this line would change everything permanently. The response came faster than expected. By 6 p.m. my phone was ringing with calls from blocked numbers, voicemails from relatives I hadn't heard from in years, and a flood of text messages expressing shock and outrage that I would involve lawyers in family matters. The first voicemail was from my father, his voice tight with controlled anger. Taylor, I just received a threatening letter from some lawyer claiming we've been harassing you. This is absolutely ridiculous and frankly insulting. We've been trying to help you through whatever crisis you're having, and you respond by threatening to sue your own family. This isn't the daughter I raised. Call me immediately so we can resolve this like adults. The second was from Marcus, sounding more hurt than angry. Taylor, what are you doing? A lawsuit? Over what exactly? Because we're disappointed that you abandoned our wedding. Because Mom is worried about you and reached out to people who care about you. This is insane, and it's proving everything we've said about your instability. Please get some help before you do something we can't come back from. But it was the third voicemail that revealed their true concerns. Logan, speaking in the background noise of what sounded like a busy restaurant, his voice carrying the bravado of someone who thought he was untouchable. Taylor, your little legal stunt is hilarious. Do you really think anyone's going to believe you're the victim here? We've got hundreds of people who saw how you acted, who know what kind of person you are. Good luck proving that family members expressing concern about your behavior constitutes harassment. You're just making yourself look more unstable and vindictive. But hey, if you want to waste money on lawyers, that's your choice. I saved all the voicemails and forwarded them to Daniel, along with screenshots of the text messages that continued to pour in throughout the evening. The family network was mobilizing again, but this time with a different message. Instead of expressing disappointment about my wedding absence, they were expressing shock about my litigious behavior, my betrayal of family trust, my apparent descent into vindictive instability. The narrative was shifting, but the tactics remained the same. Coordinate the message, control the story, paint me as the unreasonable party while positioning themselves as victims of my escalating dysfunction. But something had changed in my perspective. Instead of feeling overwhelmed by their unified response, I found myself analyzing their tactics with the same clinical detachment Daniel had shown in his office. They were following a predictable pattern, using familiar manipulation techniques, relying on strategies that had probably worked for years. The difference was that I was no longer participating in the dynamic. I wasn't defending myself, explaining my position, or trying to convince them to understand my perspective. I was simply documenting their behavior and letting my lawyer handle the response. Tuesday morning brought the social media escalation I'd been expecting. New posts appeared across multiple platforms, all expressing shock and disappointment about my decision to involve lawyers in family matters. My mother's Facebook post was particularly masterful in its emotional manipulation. I never thought I'd see the day when my own daughter would threaten to sue me for expressing love and concern. We've been worried about Taylor's recent behavior and reached out to people who care about her, hoping someone could help her through whatever she's going through. Now we're being accused of harassment for trying to help our own child. I don't understand what happened to the loving family we used to be, but I'm praying for healing and forgiveness. Sometimes the people we love most are the ones who hurt us deepest. The post generated immediate sympathy, with dozens of comments expressing outrage that children could sue their parents for caring too much. But buried in the supportive responses were a few questions that suggested not everyone was buying the narrative completely. What exactly did the lawyer's letter say? What are they accusing you of? This seems like there might be more to the story. What kind of help were you offering? Family dynamics are complicated, but if there's a legal threat involved, maybe there's something we don't know about the situation. These questioning voices were quickly overwhelmed by supportive ones, but their presence suggested that cracks were beginning to appear in the unified narrative. People were starting to wonder what might warrant legal action, what specific behaviors might have crossed lines serious enough to involve attorneys. Wednesday brought the deadline for their response to the cease and desist letter. As the day progressed without compliance, I felt a mixture of disappointment and relief. Disappointment because some part of me had hoped they would choose reconciliation over escalation. Relief because their refusal to comply made my next steps clear. Daniel called that evening with an update. They've ignored the deadline completely. No corrections, no cessation of defamatory statements, no acknowledgement that their behavior was inappropriate. We're proceeding with the lawsuit. What happens next? We file tomorrow morning. They'll be served with papers within 48 hours. Once that happens, everything becomes public record, which means the media might pick up the story. Are you prepared for that level of scrutiny? The idea of local news covering a family lawsuit felt surreal, but I'd moved beyond caring about public perception. Will it help establish the truth about what actually happened? It will force them to respond to specific allegations under oath rather than controlling the narrative through social media. They'll have to explain in legal documents why they thought it was appropriate to ask you to dress as a jester, why they felt justified in contacting your clients, why they believed their behavior was acceptable. Friday afternoon, the process servers delivered the lawsuit papers to each defendant. I wasn't present for the deliveries, but I could imagine the shock and outrage of family members realizing that their social media campaign had resulted in serious legal consequences. The lawsuit was comprehensive, detailing every defamatory statement, every instance of business interference, every coordinated attack on my reputation. It included screenshots of social media posts, copies of emails to my clients, documentation of the mounting campaign that had followed my refusal to wear a jester costume. Most importantly, it told the complete story for the first time. The legal documents explained exactly what role I'd been asked to play at the wedding, what demands I'd refused, what consequences I'd faced for setting reasonable boundaries. Anyone reading the court filings would understand that this wasn't about a selfish daughter abandoning her family, but about a woman refusing to humiliate herself for others' entertainment. The media attention Daniel had warned me about materialized by Monday morning. A local news blog picked up the story, and their headline captured the absurdity perfectly. Local woman sues family after refusing to dress as jester for brother's wedding. The article was factual and surprisingly sympathetic, presenting the case as an extreme example of family dysfunction rather than frivolous litigation. They interviewed legal experts who confirmed that the family's behavior could constitute actionable defamation and business interference. More importantly, the article included details that had been missing from the social media narrative: Readers learned about the jester costume, the humiliating sign, the coordinated pressure campaign, the attempts to sabotage my business relationship. The complete story painted a very different picture than the selective version my family had been promoting. The comments section was a revelation. Instead of supporting my family's victim narrative, readers expressed shock and outrage about their demand. They wanted her to dress as a jester and carry a sign about being a disappointment at a wedding. Who does that to their own family member? This isn't about family loyalty. This is about abuse. Good for her for standing up to these people. The fact that they're now claiming to be victims after trying to humiliate her publicly shows exactly who they really are. The tide of public opinion was shifting as people learned the facts rather than the fiction. My family's carefully crafted narrative was crumbling under the weight of complete information. Within a week, I started receiving messages from people I hadn't heard from in years. College friends who had seen the news coverage and wanted to express support. Former colleagues who had always wondered about my family dynamics, and now understood why I'd been so private about them. Even some extended family members who had been caught up in the initial social media campaign, and now felt manipulated by the selective information they'd been given. Ashley was one of the first to reach out after the lawsuit became public. "Taylor, I just want you to know how proud I am of you. I've been watching this whole thing unfold, and seeing you stand up for yourself, seeing you refuse to let them destroy you. It's been incredible. It's been terrifying," I admitted, "but you did it anyway." That's what courage actually looks like. 3 months later, my family settled the lawsuit out of court. The terms were confidential, but they included monetary compensation for my damages, public corrections on all platforms where they'd made false statements, and binding agreements to cease any further defamatory communications about me. The corrective statements were brief but effective. Each family member who had participated in the social media campaign had to post identical messages explaining that their previous statements about my character were based on incomplete information, that I had refused a demeaning role rather than a reasonable family request, and that their subsequent comments about my stability and reliability were unfounded and retracted. The post generated their own wave of comments, many expressing shock that the family had been forced to admit their statements were false. The narrative they had worked so hard to create was officially discredited, replaced by their own admissions that they had misrepresented the situation. But the most meaningful outcome wasn't financial or legal. It was the clarity that came from refusing to accept treatment I didn't deserve, from choosing my own dignity over their approval, from building a life based on my values rather than their expectations. I kept the jester costume packed away in my closet as a reminder of the moment I chose myself. Sometimes the best revenge isn't getting even. Sometimes it's simply refusing to play a role that diminishes you, and building something better in the space that refusal creates. My business thrived as clients appreciated my professionalism and integrity. I developed closer relationships with people who valued me for who I was, rather than what I could provide them. I learned that family is supposed to lift you up, not tear you down, and that love shouldn't require humiliation as proof of loyalty. The phone rarely rings with family drama anymore. Instead, it brings calls from clients who trust my judgment, friends who celebrate my successes, and occasionally other people who are learning to set boundaries with family members who mistake control for caring. Sometimes the best way to honor your family is to refuse to let them destroy you. Sometimes the most loving thing you can do is show them that their behavior has consequences. Sometimes justice looks like a folded napkin left behind, a reminder that dignity is always worth fighting for, even when the people who should protect it are the ones trying to take it away. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out.